right, so if I can get the panelists to make their way up here, I just wanted to cover a couple things. During the breaks, we'll have some important information staying on the screens. A lot of times people will ask us, hey, when's the next office visit, or the NoPro Mastermind, or Summer Summit. So kind of mark your calendar, save the dates here. And like I said, we'll keep all this information coming up during the breaks and at lunch. I appreciate everybody that's in here, following instructions, getting back on time. We're taking names of everybody who didn't follow those instructions. And they will be last in line at the reception tonight. Sit in the back of the room at the table during dinner, all that kind of stuff. All right. You guys ready for the next part? Oh my gosh, Eddie, I don't know. Who am I missing here?
Hey, when Richard Thornton comes in and starts walking up front, I want everybody just to clap like crazy, okay? Y'all clap like crazy when Richard comes walking in.
All right, so in other words, while we're waiting for Richard, right? Eddie, I think it's
Hey, Ben, go find Richard, please.
He should be, yeah, I saw him walk down the hall, so I'm assuming he's on his way back.
Yeah, you just give Richard's answers more until he gets here, right? Yeah.
All right, I think it was 4 years ago that we came up with the idea that it'd be a good idea to have different NoteSchool. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Richard Thornton.
I kind of caused that, Richard.
We give you precious stage time. Here we go.
That's right.
All right. So, Eddie, about 4 or 5 years ago, we decided we'd have a panel during an appreciation event and have some of our members come up here and tell their stories, and we can kind of interview them a little bit, give a little background. And one thing we try to accomplish each time is to show some diversity. People that have been in the program for a while, some people have been in it pretty much brand new, some come from a background maybe from the corporate world, some may be real estate investors. So I think we got a pretty good panel. Why don't we kind of go through here, and we want to let them introduce themselves, and then you can kind of tell your history as far as how you got to know them, and then we can kind of go from there. So since Richard came in last, we'll start with Chris.
Chris, you're up, baby. You're up.
All right, is this on?
Yeah.
Okay.
They're all on.
All right, my name's Chris Conti. I'm from Cleveland, Ohio. Walking distance from the Equity Trust building. Been doing this about 26 months. I buy performing and non-performing loans. What else do you want me to say?
Well, I can answer one question.
Okay.
Sometimes when you're funding with a self-directed IRA, it doesn't quite go as fast as it should. But Angie asks me all the time, it's like, well, who does Chris know? Because his deals at Equity Trust fund so quickly. And I think I just heard you say, like, you're right down the street from Equity Trust, so you're like a preferred customer. You go by there every day, bring donuts.
No, it's not quite like that, but their wealth building summit they put on last year, the one you spoke at, they had an offer for gold level service, $250 every time you put something in to get you to the top of the list for processing, and it also came with free wire transfers and free expedited services as well. So for $240, it was well worth it.
And that was called the gold level?
Gold level service.
Gold level service. Anybody heard of that? How many folks have it with Equity Trust? All right, they will be a vendor here at NoteExpo, so if you don't and you have an account there, I'd sure follow up, because I can speak from experience. Seeing deals come across the trade desk, yours go pretty good.
Yeah, and at that time, they had a special deal. They were giving actually 4 free wires, not 2. Maybe you can work something out for the group to get some extra wire put in. You know.
Well, actually, Bob's going to get on that.
I'm going to let you take the negotiating skills that Eddie taught this morning and work that out for all of us.
All right.
Okay?
A couple of things I would say about Chris. Chris initially joined NoteSchool, and he had a pretty significant personal issue with a house with mold in it. that you had just, I mean, it was like an economic issue, right? Significant.
Oh yeah,
And he came to a mastermind that we auctioned off, and came to the ranch, went to Nakona and had fun up there, and we really talked about that a lot. And it was pretty personal, almost to the point of tears with folks, right? It was pretty significant story. And the one thing I really appreciate is Chris looked at me. I never will forget this. Chris looked at me and says, "I'm not giving up," right? And the next thing you know, Moore brought a deal on the call. And on the mentor call, and says, "Hey guys, I think you guys may be missing one," and he threw it up there, and you acted on it, and you ended up making a killing on it, and I just really, I've always appreciated that. He's a quiet guy, you know, just really underassuming and stuff, but I really appreciate the fact that when he, in his very modest way of saying it, "I'm not giving up," like he showed that, and that's really what we wanted to. You represent a certain demographic in NoteSchool. I think we put you up here on purpose. I know you didn't buy 200 houses like some of these cats, but you're successful in your own way of doing this very part-time and very successfully. So y'all give him a hand.
Good to Beth. All right, Beth.
Hi, everyone. I'm Beth Hale, and I've been a NoteSchool student for quite a while now, since 2013. And I live in Denver, and I have a monthly mastermind out there, and I buy non-performing notes and performing, and have brokered a couple notes, and I'm very honored to be sitting with these four up here because their level of success is impressive.
I want to say one thing. Beth has also been very helpful and active in our, we'll call it a crusade for some regulatory relief for seller financing. She has kind of taken Colorado by the horns. She saw what the Texas 100 and the Seller Finance Coalition has done on a state and national level here, and she has worked with Matt Edwards, who works for us at NoteSchool, who is actually Eddie's son-in-law, who lives in Denver. And they've actually met in person with the congressman from that area several times and told our stories, and I think we're making some headway there, and we really appreciate that.
I just want to tell you guys about that too. You know, I volunteered to do that last NoteExpo when, what's his name? Matt Keelan was here, and you know, I said, "What can I do?" And he said, "Well, you know, here's an open house of Perlmutters," and you know, I was kind of like braced up, and oh, okay. But I got to tell you, you know, it is the easiest thing to do to go talk to your congressman. It is the easiest thing to do. They want you to do that. They want to hear from you, and it is such a slippery slope if we let things, I don't want to get on a tirade, but overregulation hurts everybody. Anytime we can chip away at overregulation and make our country free again, you know, I just want to express to you, it was it was much easier than I thought, and he was much more open than I thought, and if you're considering helping us out on this, you know, I would love it if you did, and you'd be surprised how easy it is.
Thank you.
Yeah. So let me tell you about Beth. When Beth decides to dig her teeth in, she is a woman on a mission. And so there's been some things that have happened in the industry that had nothing to do with NoteSchool, but it did affect some NoteSchool students. And there were some, and Beth became a woman on a mission to help some people in the industry get their money back from some bad acts in the business. And let me just tell you something. She is one tough woman when she wants something. And I really appreciate that in Beth. And Beth has confided in me that, you know, she was big predominantly in the non-performing space, and obviously that space has kind of gotten repositioned. And she realizes she's got to reinvent herself. And you know, the truth of the matter is, for you ninja house buyers up there, she's a little intimidated by this, but let me tell you something. That woman decides she's going to do something, you better scoot over, because she'll make something happen. And so she represents a certain percentage of people in this audience, and we picked her on this for that reason. So this is kind of a new field for her, but I can tell you, just like she's carved a path in some other areas, she'll carve a path in this, and we just kind of, we intentionally put her up here today because of that. She represents somebody reinventing themselves. Y'all give her a hand.
Thank you.
All right, Seth.
Seth Choate from Turlock, California, a very rural area. I started 6 years ago in real estate as your residential realtor, run a real estate team that'll sell roughly 100 homes. We fix and flip about 40 homes, and we wholesale another 60. Joined NoteSchool last December, and we've closed on 4 homes that we've used creative finance on.
So obviously Seth represents the new NoteSchool member, right? He's a ninja, 180 houses total last year.
Yeah, about 175.
In California market, that would definitely make him a stud. And he is. But the reason he's a stud is because he really dug in to figure this out. Seth is a good long-term thinker. Sometimes a lot of wholesalers in the business are kind of short-term thinkers. Seth's a long-term thinker, and I really appreciate that, and I appreciate that trait in him. He's got a beautiful wife and a little baby and one on the way, and he represents kind of the young audience that we see coming into NoteSchool, and I'll put him on stage, on the big stage here in a couple of days and do a case study, but he and Scott both help NoteSchool become a light to go help these guys reinvent themselves, and I think they are totally sold on the fact that if these wholesalers don't reinvent themselves, there's an issue coming down that the business isn't going to look the same. So that's why he's here. You guys give him a hand.
Yeah, I think you made a key point there, where the long-term thinking piece of it. You know, a lot of people, whether you're a real estate investor or whatever you're investing in, it's just short-term. What can I do? Boom, boom, and then all of a sudden you may be, cash rich at a time, but your wealth poor down the road because, all you're doing is, a lot of people say, well, I did $3 million. Well, they also spent $3 million, so they made zero, right? But the long-term thinker, I think, is what makes it not only in the real estate investing but in the note business. So I like that aspect of your philosophy, so to speak.
On that point, when I got into real estate, the whole focus from the get-go was passive income. And it was rentals. And this whole wholesale thing has been fun along the way, but once you make your money, you're done. And when I went to NoteSchool, what really, really intrigued me about this creative finance piece is I can still make that upfront money and then generate passive income for 10, 15, 20 years.
Awesome. Scott Bauer out of Phoenix. We run a pretty sizable wholesale operation, fix and flip, the standard thing. Been with NoteSchool for probably 6 months or so, and really look at the creative finance side of it. NoteSchool, off just the standard wholesale and fix and flip model, we come across a lot of opportunities, but we can't capitalize on all of them. And what NoteSchool has allowed us to do is look at it from a different lens and really figure out that we can monetize those opportunities that we didn't have the opportunity to do so before. So it's been a game changer. Excited to see where it's going to go in the future.
Awesome.
So Scott is in the most competitive wholesaling market in the United States. Christina Krause told me 2 days ago that the wholesaling cost of lead for one of her very biggest clients in Phoenix is $9,000. Cost per closed transaction is $9,000 in marketing cost. He bought 100 houses last year in Phoenix. That means he's a stud, because let me tell you something, it is one tough market. So for a guy that did that much business to reposition himself and say, I've got to do it, and the reason I think you guys hearing these guys' perspective is one of the marketing strategies I'm going to go show you later today is how to go find guys like that aren't coming to NoteSchool, but you can go do business with them. So clearly, Scott and Seth both are different markets, different situations. They're both in super high-end masterminds. They are highly regarded in those masterminds. And adding creative financing is now seen as a real innovation that they're really got guys listening to them. So they've been an advocate of NoteSchool. You give Scott a hand, please.
All All right, so before we get to Richard, just so I make sure I understood that point there. You're saying that in his market, the data shows that it's $9,000 cost per closed deal.
Yes.
You got to spend $9,000 in marketing to close one deal. Now, the average house size is what? $250,000, okay? I don't know what that percentage is, 9,000 of the 250, but you guys can do the math. It's probably more than it should be. And but $9,000 just to do one deal. I mean, just imagine like in the note business, right? The marketing that you spend, it's nowhere close. Eddie and I look at our analytics all the time on cost per click on the internet or Google, and we're thinking, well, $3.50 is $3.50 is too high or whatever. We're trying to get. They're spending $9,000 to get one deal in Phoenix. Now, everybody agree that's a pretty competitive market? I just wanted to take a second to put that in perspective, because when I heard that's the first time I heard it, and I was like, did you really say 9,000? I just want to make sure you did.
And I've
sometimes Eddie might exaggerate just a little bit.
Yeah.
I mean, a little bit.
And I verified that from Christina Kraus, which you guys will totally agree. If anybody knows the number, she knows it.
Wow.
So
that makes it even more impressive that you can do that. We're going to ask you a little bit later how you do that. So, and our final panelist, also from California.
Yeah. So I guess if we've gone from the new school, we're now going to the old school here, since I've got gray hair. But yes, I'm Richard Thornton. I'm based in just outside of San Francisco, a much different market than Seth is in. Seth, what's your average price for a house in your area?
300,000.
Okay, average price for my house in my area is 900. That's average, folks. So a little bit different market. I've been with NoteSchool for about 3 years ago now. I co-founded a mortgage banking firm that focused on larger apartment complexes and stuff like that a number of years ago. Sold it when the banks were all buying, and there's a buying frenzy, and then did a bunch of large senior housing stuff and got into hard money and then into notes, and primarily focus on partials right now, although I would gladly do the other stuff, but my clientele seems to gravitate towards partials and whole note sales.
Richard, how many total dollars in originations have you done?
Just for notes?
No. In your previous life, you originated commercial loans on senior housing and multifamily. What's that total dollar volume?
Well, when we sold the company, we had done about $8 billion worth.
That's a billion with a B, right?
Yeah. I probably did $1.5 billion of that myself.
But no big deal, right?
Yeah, I don't advertise it, so.
I asked Richard, so Richard's in our Note Pro Mastermind, and I asked Richard one day, we were sitting around, I said, Richard, when you joined NoteSchool, the bloom had not, let's be fair about it. The multifamily hasn't snapped yet, but let's be fair about it. I mean, I don't know what you call top of the market, but we're probably right. We're about right there, right? And I said, I'm interested. 3 years ago, the bloom wasn't quite so off the vine. Why didn't you jump off into multifamily? And your answer?
I thought it was a dead market, or it had seen its time. It was the end of the cycle. It was time to move on to something else.
There's a guy that's lent $8 billion in that industry. That was his view 3 years ago. I just think that's an interesting perspective.
Now, there are some guys who are making some money on the smaller end, but the larger end of the market had totally cycled through.
Yeah.
All right, so before we dig a little deeper, do you guys think if our goal when we create a panel is to have a diverse panel, different backgrounds, different experience with NoteSchool, different experience in quote unquote prior lives, do you think we've accomplished it with these 5? Okay. And that's one thing we do as we're putting this together. First, we make a list of who's been up here on stage before, because we want to bring in new folks, right? So we don't want to just have a recycling. And we always find people when we're beating it up saying, he's got a great story. She'd be a great one. And we kind of beat that up and put it together. So, Richard, since you brought up old school, right? And being in the program for 3 years and so, and like Eddie said, you're in the mastermind. I know we've done some trades together, and you attend most if not all events that we have going on. Some of the people out here have been here a little less than you. I mean, if there's one thing you know now that you wish you knew back when you started that you can tell them to help accelerate the curve, is there anything you can think of? And Chris and Beth, I'll probably come to you with a similar question so you get it better because you can think about it. Richard, right off on the stop here. So
I'd say when I first started, we thought that you couldn't raise money in meetups, and there's a lot of coyotes, and I will admit that. But I'd say get your network going as soon as you possibly can. Even if you think you're I held off a little bit because I thought, oh, gee, I really don't know the product all that well. And I'm somebody who likes to be able to walk and talk something to the nth degree if somebody's going to ask me some question. It's all right. If you only know 50% of it, you say, I'll get back to you. And that's fine. So start raising money as soon as you can.
awesome.
One thing Richard's done that I thought was really interesting he's gone to sort of a silk stock and row realtor kind of a network. And he acts, as we know, realtors have no retirement ever. And so he's found a bunch of high income, high commissioned realtors, and he's got them to be passive investors for notes. I don't know any other student that's ever chased that angle, but I think that was really clever.
And you say you did that because that was kind of the environment you were comfortable in? Is that?
Well, in terms of Beth remaking yourself, if you looked at my old network was national. I mean, I had a peer group like we have here, but they were in New York and Miami and Pittsburgh, and they were all with REITs, and so it was a completely different peer group. So I had to rebuild a peer group. And when I started, when the seniors industry fell apart because of the recession, I started flipping houses. And I flipped a number of houses, making hard money loans, so I got to know a lot of realtors, so I had a ready-made market there. And a lot of realtors will make $50,000 or $60,000 commission, and if they do 10 houses a year, they'd say, look, I'll give you one before June and one in September. Okay, fine. You buy a note with each one of those, and then they're building their retirement.
Very smart.
Good. Chris, if you could tell these guys here something that would advance their learning curve a little bit. We got a mic?
Oh, sorry.
It should be on. They'll work it from the back.
Yeah. Looking back when I first started, Dwayne McCartney over here, I had met him prior to joining NoteSchool, and we had talked, and so I understood what I was getting into. And I went to my first, I think it was Summer Summit, and he took me around the room and introduced me to almost everybody there. And that's where now there's a group of you out here within the crowd that I know anytime I need help, I contact them. And I know Eddie gets upset and he's like, why don't you come to me, bring it to content. But I do like to get perspectives from different people on different things. And that's really helped me a lot when I got going. Because when I'm talking to y'all, even though I may not look like I'm paying attention, I'm hearing where you're from and different things you're doing. And I just try to find similar situations that can help me out with that you've all been through. And
awesome. Yeah. All right, so what he's talking about is the NoteSchool community. Get plugged in to the NoteSchool community, which, just look around, this is what we're talking about. This is one of the reasons we have Summer Summit and the Appreciation Day and NoteExpo, is so that you guys you're your own network, right? And you made a great point. You meet people from all over, right? And you know that you're not just buying in Cleveland. And if you've come across a deal and you know that Greg lives in Indianapolis, you're going to go give him a call, see if he can give you some color on something, right? And that's the beauty of it. And there's a lot of you that I've reached out to when I'm doing due diligence on assets and say, what do you know about that area of Kansas City? Or what can you tell me over here about this particular market in North Carolina or whatever? So you use that. And Seattle, Washington. I saw you, Mariska. I always reach out to, I usually call Larry. But it is important. And some people are like, look, if you're going to be here for 3 days, right, and you're going to have breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and a cocktail party, and you sit with the same 3 people, that's your fault. Okay, we're giving you an environment to meet and greet and to get, and then it's even compounded on Friday and Saturday when there's other people in the industry that you can meet, along with service providers and vendors and that kind of stuff. That is the beauty of it, okay? I mean, how many people are on Facebook groups about note investing? There seems to be like 1 million of them out there. They ask all kinds of questions. You get engaged in that, and you find contacts throughout, and that's what it's all about.
Let me make one comment, okay? It's not that I don't want you seeking questions. Why don't you just, before you finally pull the trigger, why don't you then bring it to content, and let's make sure that that's a cumulative thought process, because that's all I want, right? Because I'm just trying to avoid the hot sports opinion on Facebook. Sometimes it's not really a great idea. So get those ideas, go search them, network among yourselves, network with other people, but then right before you're fixing to pull the trigger, then you can bring it to content. It's easy to do, and then we can just make sure that that's good. So I think that accomplishes, I love the networking, the ideas, and this is why I think you guys are in this room today, is at the end of the day, go bring the accumulation of ideas together, and then let's just run a final vet by it before we pull the trigger on it. But the networking is awesome, and you made a great point, and that is some of you guys that are more senior and been here for years, and you meet somebody today that's new, help them make some introductions. Just go introduce them to 10 people. Help them get engage with people like that. That would be very helpful. It's a great.
Yeah, did you get the very first part of it was Dwayne McCartney took him around at his first event and introduced him to people that he knew, right? All right, so before we turn it over to Beth, I do want to chime in on one thing that Eddie said. Before you get on the hot sports opinion on Facebook groups, right? Okay. Here's kind of how I see it, and I try to stay active. I don't comment a whole lot just because, I mean, I'm a little higher profile than some, and I just don't want to get bombarded. But like I see things on there like, who's the best servicer? Okay, and then there's threads this long. And my answer, because I was in a mood at the time where I felt like I should chime in, is that's the reason why you should come to NoteExpo. We're going to have 6 servicers, and I listed them. All there, you come meet them face to face, you find out who's a good fit for you, right? Because just because this guy did a great deal for Chris, doesn't mean that the next person, Beth has an NPL that they just totally mess up. You have to be the one to vet them out. It's great to get recommendations and referrals, I'm not saying that, but you're the one who has to make the ultimate decision. And in my mind, this is Bob's personal opinion, if you base it on 2 people on Facebook, all you're getting is 2 people that had a really great time or a really bad time. Right? So that's why you go to one industry event where you can meet 6 different servicers. How much do you charge for this? What do you do here? What if a guy defaults when it's the first time you call him? All those kind of questions. That's what you take advantage of in the exhibit hall the next 2 days. All right, Beth, what can you help these people speed up their learning curve?
I want to just reiterate what these guys have said. The best kept, most organized part of my business is my contacts database. These are now almost 1,700 people that I have shook hands with, and those aren't all in the note industry. That started with my real estate investing. And that's just me. I'm an ex-engineer, and I told myself I was going to be weak on the people skills, so I decided I'd be strong on the database. And that has saved me so many times, just sorting those people right so I can search up an RMLO right away, search up an attorney in Ohio right away. But the other thing I want to tell you is, Eddie's said this for years, and it's so true. Part of this business is managing your vendors. You know, there are others in this industry that will tell you just delegate everything and let it go. And that's just not been a good formula for me from the beginning. I've stayed on top of the servicers, stayed on top of the lawyers, stayed on top of everything. And it's really served me in 2 ways. One, I learned the most that way because I would have questions that no one else seemed to answer. And 2, it kept things from getting stale. So don't ever forget that managing your vendors is a really important part of this business.
Good advice.
I want to change it up a little bit for you guys, okay, since you're relatively new. what was one of the first questions you asked that was beneficial, or a question you wish you had asked sooner that would have helped you along the way, or something you did ask that took it to the next level faster for you? Or got you plugged in?
So I wasn't
quick?
ready for that question. I was going to answer the same question, which I'd like to answer because I think it's important. So,
Hey, cut the mic.
so what I would say is show up to the calls. I can tell you that one of the biggest things that I did, I saved a couple $100,000 because I showed up to the calls. So is Seth. I mean, we make those calls are there on purpose. So you show up to the calls, you give an example or something that you're working on, and these guys that are the masters of it will help you to make sure that you win. That in and of itself pays for the fee to be here. 100%. So that's just my tip for everybody. Show up to the calls.
Good.
That's good.
You said, what would you ask? And my answer to that is, go get into a deal and get in the middle of it and get screwed up, and then get on the call and ask the question that you don't know. Like, that's the answer, because you don't know what to ask until you're in it. And you don't learn until you get in and do a deal. You're never going to know it all, and you're definitely not going to know anything if you just sit back and wait. I had no idea what I was doing on the first one. I still have no idea what I'm doing. And I bring it on every call.
But one key that he started his point was, go get involved in the middle of the deal, and then they'll help you go to call. In other words, no hypothetical situations, right? Well, what if this? We can what if all day, right, Eddie? How do you like hypotheticals?
Yeah, there's just no doubt about it. And then one thing I wanted to, like Scott and you and Seth, if you would, so you completely, fully understand there's some excessively super smart guys out here, right? They may not be exactly your personality DNA, but they can run a calculator. They understand how the workflow of a deal. You got a lady sitting by you that wants to kind of reinvent herself, same thing, right? They're smart. They're a little bit intimidated, truth be told, because you are what I call the ninjas, right? Seth is probably one of the most outstanding members of Billionaire Boardroom. You agree with that, Scott? He's an award winner at Billionaire Boardrooms. $38,000 a year to be in that, by the way. And Scott is a 100-house-a-year closer in Phoenix, most competitive market in the country. And they're kind of a little bit intimidated, right? You guys are like, whether you're in Collective Genius or you're in Boardroom or you're a higher level in Investor Fuel or that kind of thing. And I just want, so if somebody's not going to come reinvent themselves and come to NoteSchool, and not all of your buddies are going to do that. We agreed on that, right? How does somebody like Beth go become an ancillary part of their business and go take creative financing and add it to their business in some kind of a joint venture? You guys help her with this. How does she do that?
One of the biggest things for me is that I was so stuck in what I knew how to do. Okay, I got really, really, really good at it. And joining NoteSchool made me realize that there's another side of it that I don't know how to do as well, and I could use that help because I can 10x my business that much further, right? So how can you help me, Beth, in this situation? Is that you could come in as, I don't know, a joint venture partner. We could look at a deal together. You can bring your expertise to something I'm working on. That's how we could work together. That's a very simple way to make that happen.
So right now I have 8,000 plus old leads sitting in a database that we recycle over and over and over again. There are wholesalers out there who have a lot more than me and they never recycle them. You can easily, I'd reach out to those people and say, hey, I know you have a boatload of old, what you consider dead leads. Let me work those. Let me call those people. If we get something on the table, we'll split the deal. I'll pay you a fee, something of that nature. But this is dead, what they call dead business, and it's free leads for you. When we started here, I went back through all that and recycled everything to try to find leads that we could do for creative finance.
All right. How do they find, I tell them don't go deal with the babies, right? Don't go find a guy that just got out of Fortune Builders or Rich Dad or whatever, just because that guy's business isn't seasoned enough and the advertising he's doing probably isn't the most effective. So how do they go find the biggest 20 guys in their market? How would you, if I landed you on a plane in Kansas City, how would you go find the 20 biggest guys, Scott?
Go to a meetup, find out what meetups are going on, either a meetup or a RIA that's big in the area, and ask. I mean, simply asking, a lot of times you go into a room. I know if you go to the Phoenix RIA and you go ask in the room who's the biggest person in that market, I mean, you're going to get some sort of direction on where to go. With the advent of meetups recently, I feel like in the last 5 years, meetups have been the biggest thing. And so you can join no matter what market you're in or where you're going. You can always find somewhere to go, like a meetup that'll tell you, who's the players in that market.
And once you find 5 of them, you can find the other 10.
That's exactly right. Because really, there's not that many people that are doing massive volume in any market. There's only a handful of them. Phoenix is one of the largest markets, I think, in the country. There's only a handful of us that are really doing deals. There's a couple of us sitting in the room today. So.
Yep. Anything different, Seth?
There's a couple things. You can go and reverse prospect by pulling a list of people who have bought homes cash in the last 24 months, and you can probably see somebody who's bought more than 5. That's probably a player in your market. And then what you do is you reach out to them, and they may be marketing and they may be the big player, or they buy their deals from the big player and you reach out to that person. The other way to do it is go and look online and see who on the MLS is flipping all the homes. You're going to see the same pattern of same flooring, same granite, same everything. And if you keep seeing that house over and over and over again, look up that person on the tax records and reach out to them that way. And they're probably doing a high volume of marketing.
So the ultimate list vendor in the real estate investing world is a guy that lives in Seattle. His name is Chris Richter, right? The Richter list, he's the baddest cat in the business, right? He's in CG with me. He has a list of $1,500 per state that has every 6-month or less ownership in every state in the United States. It's $1,500 per state. If you're interested in that, that could be part of the survey, Bob. I can go scrape data in any market and tell you every transaction that they own for less than 6 months in any state in the United States. And also it'll tell me if they got a hard money loan they paid cash. That's part of the Richter list, right? Most people don't know about it, but it's like if I were going to be a hard money lender, I would never go to a RIA. I'd just go by the Richter list. You want to know who to loan money to? There you go.
All right, so we got a few minutes left to give each one of you, we'll say about a minute. And what I want you to do is to tell everybody, because part of the beauty of being part of the community is we can hold people accountable. What do you want to accomplish between now and next year's NoteExpo? Personally, professionally, business-wise, no business, whatever. What do you want to, by the next time I see you at NoteExpo, Richard, what do you want to accomplish?
Well, my target is to sell 30 more partials and as many as whole notes as I possibly can, and to have as much short-term acquisition money as I have, probably 3-year money that I can use to buy and to move more into portfolios. That's where I'm heading right now.
All right. And we're going to ask you at Summer Summit how you're progressing on that. All right. How about you, Scott?
I want to have control of 30 seller finance notes of some sort, whether that's creatively financed deals I put together myself or notes I buy off Notes Direct, etc. by this time next year.
Awesome. Good. Seth?
Well, when I first started, I wanted to do everything. I got all excited. I said, I'm going to broker notes. I'm going to do partials. I'm going to do all this stuff. And then I did nothing for the first 3 months. So we focused on the creative finance piece first, and we figured that out, and we're working with that. My focus for this next year is going to be to raise $1 million to buy partials or loan money at 6 to 7% interest.
Good. Excellent.
As Eddie said, I'm reinventing myself. My goal is to to initiate 10 buying on terms deals.
I hadn't given this one much thought, but I'm still working a full-time job. At this point, I just want to lock down somewhere between 4 and 8 parcels. Been working a lot of the burned out landlords in the Cleveland area, the guys that are getting tired of dealing with the city and the county, and I think it's starting to gain some traction. So.
That's good.
Awesome. All right, well, before we let these guys go, Eddie, I want to let everybody know, we had a quick call. We just said we're going to let you tell your stories, but they had no idea what we were going to ask them, right? And what I really like about the last question is they didn't really hesitate about what they want to do between now and next year's NoteExpo. And I think that speaks volumes. If you're going to be successful in whatever business, whatever strategy, philosophy, whatever your goal is, to have a goal, right? And you heard it all the way from, I got a job, I want to do 4 to 8 more, to I want to do 30, you know, I'm going to do 30 here, you're going to do 30, he's going to raise $1 million. You know, so everybody's got their own path, but they all have a goal. And one thing I also wanted to mention, it's kind of a teaser for NoteExpo, our keynote, but both Beth and Seth made reference to their database. And our keynote speaker tomorrow is going to be talking about cybersecurity, okay? And if she has 1,700 contacts and she gets hacked and loses them all, what's going to happen to that if she doesn't have protections in place to her system, right? Same thing with Seth. He's got 8,000 dead leads. He'll have none if something happens on his system. And part of the reason Eddie and I were like, well, what is a topic that we haven't talked about that's really can impact people? And we were like, hey, cybersecurity. And you'll hear about that tomorrow and why we came up with that. But sometimes you're a small investor and you don't really think, oh, only the big boys get hacked or only the big guys get affected by that. And that's not the case. And you guys will hear some interesting stories and data tomorrow about how it can impact small business people like you if you don't have some, you know, precautions in place. So that's my pitch to be here for the keynote.
Bob and I think really for small business owners, not real estate necessarily, but small business owners, period, we think the biggest risk to their business is cybersecurity. We really do believe that. And many of you come from the technology world, or you come from a world where you're very familiar with that. We are just trying to create an awareness and give a real solution for people to protect their business. So there is countless stories. In our mastermind, in our real estate, our Note Pro mastermind, Martha had somebody that had already wired her or emailed her and changed their wire. And Martha had already went to the bank and ordered the wire. And leaving the bank, she goes, I better double check with my client to make sure that they really did do that. She called the lady and the lady said, I didn't send you an email. And Martha tells that story, and Mitch Stephen had it happen to him the week before for $48,000, and they caught it. So Martha saved $98,000 by questioning. Mitch saved $48,000, and that is just that is how prevalent this is. So take that really seriously, guys. This is a whole new threat to our businesses that we just have never considered. And most people, I've found that their IT guys thinks they have you protected, and the truth of the matter is they really don't. The guy we have coming, they're ex-CIA guys. They're some bad cats. I mean, these guys play at a completely different level. And they protect some big companies, and we were very honored that they were willing to come share with us. So let me say this about this panel. We felt like this fairly represented a lot of the NoteSchool audience. You guys represent kind of the new breed of NoteSchool. You're young, smart, aggressive. I think you really could appreciate what I said this morning about note flipping. Because I've got to get these guys to think at a different level. I want to go have a squadron of people that can broker notes, like you guys buy houses, that they're operating at a different psychology level, a different intensity level. They're getting the juice out of the lemon, right? Richard, I think you represent somebody that had a chance to go leave. You kind of retired and from an industry, and you said, I want to go do something different. And that clearly was a conscious choice you made. And I think I applaud you and how you're doing it. Beth, you're smart. I want you to have confidence. And you start realizing that these guys are just guys, right? They're just regular guys. You know, they're good at what they do, but they're regular. The guys that are too cocky to talk to you, I can tell you right now, behind the scenes, they're scared to death. And those guys will nod and tell you that's absolutely true. If they act like they're too cocky, I'm telling you, behind the scenes, they're scared to death. So don't get intimidated, because there ain't nothing to be intimidated from. What you know, they need. Chris, you got a full-time job, you're busy as heck, and you just represent somebody that's using NoteSchool on a part-time basis. You're not looking to retire, and you're just doing something on a very part-time basis, but you got some killer numbers behind you. You've done good, and just keep doing it. And you may never walk off your company job, right? You may just keep doing this forever and just building up what you got. No, it's okay. It's okay, because you're a super duper guy at what you do corporately, and you get paid. He's got like the highest level security you can have in the government, by the way, just so you know that. So he's like one of those guys. He knows crap about me that I don't want him to know.
All right, well, let's hear it for the panel. Thank you, guys. We appreciate it.